was a national security advisor with the Department of Health and Human Services, a managing director with Kroll Associates, and a guest on national television because of his background in counter-terrorism and his specialised knowledge of biological warfare. And to complete this little hat-trick, from 9/11 Review, on 9/11, Kroll was in charge of security for the entire World Trade Center complex. So an interesting little history of them. How is it that Kroll get involved in your case?
Well, the reinsurance company actually owned Kroll at that time. They have subsequently sold them, but at that time they actually owned Kroll.
So this is the reinsurance company who employed the guy who was having the affair?
Absolutely.
Right, I'm with you. So in terms of that situation, somehow Kroll was involved in trying to fit you up for something you weren't involved with. Is this what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, I'll talk about Kroll's involvement in terms of how they manipulated the events of the case, because remember the police force of the Surrey Police have said it's civil.
Yeah.
So I've got the emails from the managing director of Kroll saying it's not a problem. What we need to do is we'll use our contacts at the City of London Police, which they
So this is Kroll talking to who?
Well, this is Kroll talking to the reinsurance company.
Right, so this is an internal email between the two of them. How did that come into your hands?
Through the CPS. The CPS disclosed absolutely everything.
Good Lord, okay.
Fantastic. CPS are fantastic.
Right. So you've got this situation that they're actually, that email demonstrates their collusion to try and find a way to prosecute you via the civil means, yeah?
Well, they decided not to go down the civil means,
right?
For some very, very simple reasons. Obviously, it's going to be incredibly damaging for the reinsurance company if a board member's been fiddling his expenses. Okay, having an affair, these things happen, but fiddling his expenses, having an affair. There was photographs of him doing naughty things.
Right.
Very, very damaging for the company. So for the company to have a big civil court case, you can imagine the headlines: world's biggest reinsurance company sues plumber because he was a bit upset about all this nonsense. It's not a headline that I think any business would court, let alone the world's biggest reinsurance company. Very, very conservative, discreet organisation. So what they did was they brought Kroll in to sort of manage the situation.
Right.
And I hate to say the word sex it up.
Okay, fair enough.
So Kroll in the first instance, working with a very respectable legal firm, got a High Court order to firstly get my bank accounts, to get to monitor my phone calls, messages.
How can they do that? Because, I mean, on what basis would they get a court to allow that to happen?
They did it really easy. It was very, very simple because they said that they got an ex-party hearing, so that means I'm not informed. I don't know this is going on. And on the guise that it said that there were threats of physical violence, against their staff, threats of physical staff. So that was on the 14th of July that they went to the High Court, and on the strength of that, secured that court order to do that.
Good Lord, right.
6 days later, the managing director of Kroll says there is no serious risk or threats. So 6 days earlier, major threats, physical violence. We need that information. They've got the court order. Let's obtain the information. Internal email. There is no serious risk. There is no serious risk or threats.
And at what point did our friend, the person who had the affair, disappear from the scene? What happened there?
At that point, he was maintaining there was no affair. There was no affair. That I made it up and was disgruntled and jealous and all that kind of nonsense. In which case, if I had made all this up, by the way, I should be locked up, and I will completely accept that.
Yeah. Right.
So what Kroll do is, oh, by the way, on the 20th, I'll skip this, I just want to get the dates correct because they're quite important. On the 14th of July, strong physical threats.
Right.
20th of July, there is no significant threat and there is no risk for myself. 3 days later, he may be dangerously unstable.
Right, so change of attack.
Yeah.
Change of attack from violent hoodlum to complete lunacy.
There's lots of emails, there's loads of emails, and basically the narrative is, if you can get enough people saying, this guy's a loony, he's crazy, he's threatening, he's of a violent disposition, he's this, he's that. If enough people say that, it becomes part of the story, it becomes the reality, and that's clearly what happened. Say
something often enough and people will accept it.
I think that's true, yeah.
Of the reality, right. Yeah.
So what they then did is, they then, the email says here, this is again from the Managing Director of Kroll, he then says that we've got contacts, our head of security has got contacts at the City of London, he will pursue those.
City of London Police.
City of London Police, yeah, forgive me,
right.
City of London Police, not the Metropolitan Police.
Right.
He then arranges some meetings with Detective Chief Inspector Chandler, the City of London Police,
right.
Detective Superintendent Davies, from City of London Police, also the head of the Major Crimes Directorate, and also the head of the Serious Crimes Directorate. So we've gone now from one police force, this is civil, and the guy won't turn up, to threats, no threat, always dangerously unstable, and now we're with all the gods, with the senior heads.
And when we say the guy won't turn up, this is the guy who had the affair, not you.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're talking about big guns here.
We're now in a meeting.
Yeah.
We're now in a meeting with the top guns at City London Police,
who are pursuing it on a criminal level.
Well, this meeting is to decide whether they're going to do that. At the end of this 4-hour meeting, the Detective Chief Inspector confirms that they will put significant resources into investigating this case, and then my house is raided by the Counter-Terrorism Directorate.
And that's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
So there is a point then, after all this happens, that the guy who had the affair then resigns from the company.
No, we don't get to the stage, because at this point he's still maintaining that there was no affair.
So he's still maintaining
there was no affair.
Right.
So we get to our first court hearing, where you have I think it's called a committal hearing, so you go along, plead guilty or not guilty, and they set a date.
Yeah.
At the Magistrates' Court, it's my first time in court, behind bars, and has to be adjourned because there's no paperwork.
Lovely.
No paperwork. It has to be adjourned. So before it's adjourned, the magistrate, and I don't know this magistrate's name, he's a spitting image of Nick Robinson, the BBC political with the glass. It's not him, but a spitting image of him.
So we paint the picture.
He was absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic. He said, we need to adjourn this, but before we do, we're very, very concerned about these bail conditions. He said, I need to examine these bail conditions before we do anything.
And you can find out what happens next after this break. Text.
Do you?
Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm Alex G. And now we're just going to go over, get a summary of your texts so far, and here's Melissa.
Thank you. Dante says, this feels like a classic case of abuse of the recent terrorism laws against those seeking justice against the government and corporations. Another text says, another example of Big Brother clamping down on our freedoms. Another person says, the individuals within our various authorities need to be woken up to the type of personalities that make decisions and give orders. And Dennis of Tunbridge says, tell them nothing, let them prove it.
Well, there you go. Well, Ian, it seems unanimous support for your cause here, which I think, judging on the evidence, is probably the right conclusion. Who am I to judge? So we'd got to the magistrate, looking at the bail conditions and going, hold on a tick. So where do we go from here?
Well, this was funny in as much as it was farcical. The magistrate said that obviously he couldn't do anything with the case because there was no paperwork there. But he said, before we adjourn this, I want somebody to explain these bail conditions. So this police officer from City of London stood in the dock, and he explained that the bail conditions were fair and could be enforced, were reasonable. The magistrate said that he found them tyrannical and unenforceable. Policeman disagreed.
Goodness.
So he said, could you tell me what Mr. Puddick is alleged to have done, please? So the policeman said he threatened I threatened the chap, his family, his children and associates. So he said, very, very serious charges. And the policeman said, yeah, absolutely. He said, well, why is he charged with non-violent harassment? Right. So he said, well, there were a lot of threats, a lot of very, very specific threats that included violence. So he said, well, can you tell me why he's not been charged with these offences? So the policeman couldn't answer this. So then he said to the policeman, could you tell me the nature of the threats? And the policeman waffled. Right. He asked him 3 times. He didn't get a direct answer. He said, let me make it really simple for you because I'm not making myself clear. He said, I want to know, did Mr. Puddick threaten blah, 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 blah with violence? Were there threats of violence? I want a yes or no answer. And he said, let me make it easy for you. Did Mr. Puddick ring these people up and say, I know where you live, I'm going to duff you in? That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
And the policeman paused and went, no. So the magistrate was absolutely incensed and said, well, I'm feeling threatened now by Mr. Puddick. What is going on? So the policeman said, well, Mr. Puddick has alleged that there was an affair and with his partner, and also misuse of expenses. These are vigorously denied. These are vigorously denied, and we've thoroughly investigated them and found no evidence of an affair. So I'm in the dock with my hand up, because I didn't know when you were allowed to speak. I didn't know. I've never been in court. So I've got my hand up like I'm at school, and the magistrate addressed me, and I said, could you ask the police officer, in their thorough investigation, why they've never interviewed my partner? And he said, please tell me they've interviewed your partner. I went, so he addressed the policeman, and the policeman said, no, she doesn't form part of the case. So the magistrate said, well, I'm going to dismiss this. I'm removing all of the bail conditions. I'll just ask you not to contact the chap concerned. I went, no problem at all. Yep. Then he removed all of the bail conditions and wished me well, which was very nice of him. He didn't need to do that. Wished me well. And as we left walked out of the courtroom, the police officer called me a W.
Oh, that's very
because
nice.
he was completely humiliated by his own stupidity.
So this is a technical term in the police that we have no idea of the real definition of, obviously.
No, clearly.
Right. So there we go. You're out of off the hook, if you like.
Yeah.
What's the next stage?
The next stage is we've set a date for trial at a later hearing. Set a date for trial in April 2010. In March 2010, obviously the company has a duty of care to obviously investigate some of the very serious claims that have been made.
Reinsurance company.
Absolutely.
Yep, right.
And they investigate this person's expenses. Yep. And after 30 years as a main board member, he resigns.
Okay.
He resigns.
Right.
The case is dropped against me.
Yes.
I am so appalled at this complete abuse of power that I create the website ianpuddick.com, but it's actually posted now to policeexpenses.co.uk.
Right.
I literally have created a video that forms the narrative to say all of these things have happened to me. I've not been violent. I've not threatened anybody.
Yeah.
There's been a huge abuse of power, and it's wrong. It's completely and utterly wrong.
And from the sound of it, I don't think there's any way we could misinterpret the fact that this guy quit because they found something about the expenses. Now, some information for you, which basically was brought to my attention, which you might find interesting. Now, when this guy was actually exposed, the reinsurance company, being that they've got American links, they're actually subject to what is called American SOX. Now, that stands for Sarbanes-Oxley regulations. Now, these were brought in after the fiasco involving Enron. Right. And now this is relevant to any legal accounting entry, any illegal accounting entry, including expenses. So what we've got here, if you take Sarbanes-Oxley regulations to heart, is a situation where something criminal was occurring.